Hello, hello.
Hi.
We have Shelley Murphy with us here tonight. It's just her and I. We didn't have a guest this last week because, of course, we had the Sourceathon. But so we're going to go ahead and talk about the usual stuff and get it out of the way before we get to do the fun stuff and talk to Shelley.
Okay.
For anybody that doesn't know, WikiTree is a community of genealogists who are working together on a single family tree. I'm going to throw up our little presentation there. In other words, we collaborate to grow an accurate global tree that connects us all, and it's free. The WikiTree Challenge is our year-long event we've been doing, and it plays into our year of accuracy, where each week a team of WikiTreeers takes on a guest star's tree, and we try and make it as accurate and more complete than it is anywhere else online. Our goal is to improve our accuracy, make more family connections, and make more friends, which we've certainly done this year. So as I said, we did not have a guest to wrap up today because we had our 6th annual Sourceathon this last weekend. And what a great show of community collaboration that was. I hope everybody finally got some sleep in, ate more of the snacks at your desk. I know I have. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the challenge. Now, of course, any of you that are participating, no, on the left there, we have our spreadsheet, and this is our way to keep track of the profiles we're going to be working on, or we are currently working on, so that nobody um, takes away our work. We don't want two people working on the same one and somebody tries to save and they can't. Now, on the right is the G2G post, and that is where we list the 8 great grandparents if we have them, and people mostly post for bounty points in there. They have to be posted in there, or I can't count them, and your captain can't count them. So put them out there if you find them. And then sometimes also questions are asked there, or interesting finds are made. Now, our final way, and this is our most important way, is Discord, and we just love it. We have live chat that goes around the clock during the week. Seeing as this is a global site, we have people from all over. And so, in there, we can ask for a second set of eyes. We can get somebody's translation help. We have people that like to look up newspaper obituaries and articles. And sometimes we just kind of motivate each other and cheer each other on. Now, normally we have a point system, and while it's not all about the points, it does give us a little bit of extra way to gauge how we're doing and to help motivate people. So there's 2 ways to earn points during the week. We have our bounty points are the big one, and of course that's 10 points for each ancestor. The first one you find that's a brick wall ancestor on any given line. The other way is for nuclear relatives, and that would be 1 point each for those, and those can add up. Let me tell you, some of these families that we found this year have been really big. As a matter of fact, during the Sourceathon, I had a man that had 24 children. So
Oh my goodness.
I know, Lord, right? I don't know how many wives he had.
Not
I don't
worried
think
about
that was
him, but the
completely
women.
sourced. I know. And then at the end of the week, we look at the total score. So normally we would have our most valuable player there that had gotten the most points. Of course, we didn't have a top scorer because we did not have a guest this last week. And yes, I stole the top 5 from the Sourceathon. So go Leandra, Sandy, Emma, Pip, and Jim. You guys did awesome. And then for 2021, we're going to go ahead and look this over briefly. And this is what we've had to work with so far. And we had some bumps at the start of the year where we were trying to figure everything out and get it all coordinated. But it just amazes me when I think of how much we have accomplished this year, and you guys that have worked on within the teams have accomplished. And this year so far, we've done 34 guests. We have had 12 captains, 22 different top bounty hunters. Now, of course, some of those like to stay in that top list, and they've hit it more than once. And then 285 different registered WikiTreeers. So, that's a lot of people. And this is what we did with it. Now, this is just crazy when you look at the numbers. If you're a number person, and I am, I love numbers. But total points for everything that you guys have done this year is well over 17,000. Ancestors created is more than 2,800. The nuclear relatives, and that's those siblings or children, created more than 8,100. And of course, that isn't counting all the ones you added to the in-laws and the brother and whatnot. Now, bounty points, a total of 6,420, which is just crazy. So you guys have broken down 642 brick walls this year. Just amazing. And then profiles edited. Now, these are the unique profiles edited during each week. And our total right now is more than 25,000. So that's a big improvement. And total edits, that's of course, every time we go in, add a date, add another source, correct something, that's an edit, that's a contribution. And there have been 105,338 of those. So,
Amazing.
isn't it? Way to go, everybody that has participated. And then upcoming, we still have, and we do actually have our schedule full now. So I know people are still suggesting guest stars, but we actually have all of our weeks filled, which is exciting. But yeah, and for the next ones that are coming up, we'll have Roberta Estes, of course, a pioneer in genetic genealogy. We have Irene Cornish. That one's going to be delightful. And that is the one where the great-grandparents' marriage certificate was found hidden in the back of that painting. Yeah, it was great. I don't know if you saw that story,
I
Shelley, but it was
did.
really great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually am a patron follower of Connie, so yes.
Yes. I love Connie.
Yes.
We're going to take it from where Connie did her genealogy, and we're going to take her out further. And so that's going to be something different this year that we're doing. Now, James Tanner, he is a genealogy author and blogger. So he has many books out. And then Claire Brisson Banks of Timeless Genealogies.
Got it.
So now we're going to get to the part everybody's been waiting for. They're like, Mindy, quit talking. We want to find out what Shelly has to say. And Shelley is the Descendant Project researcher, joining the Division for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. She joined that in March of 2021. She's been an avid genealogist for over 30 years. She's known as the Family Tree Girl. She lives in Central Virginia. Good state to live in.
Yes, especially for research.
She conducts genealogy workshops at conferences and is known for her inspirational genealogical research and problem-solving methodology. She's a coordinator and an instructor at the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute and serves on the board of the Library of Virginia, Albemarle. Didn't get through that one.
Albemarle.
Albemarle. Okay,
There
I'll
you
get that
go.
right next time. Charlottesville and Fluvanna Historical Societies. So that's a lot you have going on there, Shelley. Is there anything else
Little
that I
busy.
missed on that one?
No, just a little busy, but I love it. Like I was telling you before, I retired December 2018. Thought I was going to be doing something else, and a little bit different.
Yeah. Are you going to tell them what's on your shirt?
Oh, yes. Thomas McKenty had posted this. I'm going to stand up. Said, yes, I have a retirement plan. I plan to do genealogy. And so, yeah, when I retired, that was the goal. And it lasted from December to July. So that was kind of the first time really focusing on my own tree. And then I started working for the University of Virginia, doing research, finding the descendants of the enslaved laborers that basically built that university for Thomas Jefferson. And so that's a whirlwind right there.
Yeah.
Well, like Cheryl, thank you.
Everywhere. Okay, so what got you interested in genealogy to begin with?
My mother. And she always talked about listening to her grandmother tell stories. And her grandmother always talked about the past. And she made the statement sharing with me, and this is like in the late 70s, that her grandmother's father was a slave. What? What does that mean? Wait a minute. I don't know about that. Wait, we had slaves in the family, just because it's never been talked about, you know. And then the other thing, she made a comment from remembering her dad always saying that, his folks talk gibberish in the house. What is gibberish? So again, not understanding, I'm going to say, somewhat the makeup of the family. And that got me interested helping her. And during this time, she was writing letters to request birth certificates, marriage. And I'm going to tell you, she has a copy of every letter she wrote in a box when she requested information. And I asked my dad, this is in the 90s before he passed, why did you never tell that woman about copy paper? Why did you not tell her about carbon copy paper? She
Yeah.
literally wrote 2 letters
Oh, wow.
requesting, and that was her keeping a copy, and she still has them.
That's
So those
amazing.
are the things that got me going. The internet was coming in, and we were learning. We still were requesting things pretty much by mail, so it's definitely not what we got now. But so I was basically trying to help her and then say, who was this slave and what is this gibberish? And so those are the 2 things that really got me going.
Now, if you had to pick one, who is your favorite ancestor?
I would have to say I have a second great grandmother, and her name is Mildred Ann Brand Davis. And the reason I picked her, she's supposedly born in Richmond, Virginia in 1818. For some reason, she got sent to Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Don't know why.
Wow.
But she acquires 11 acres of land as a free person of color. And a family, the Moen family, Peter and his wife, gave her a life estate in 11 acres. And this is in 1841. So I'm going to pride myself that she was a landowner, but then she gets married. So you know what happened to that land. But the life estate was for her and her children, not the husband, because she did get married after she acquired the land. So I'd have to say for her and what she had done, and they eventually left Pennsylvania, stopped in Ohio, and then came into Michigan and actually homesteaded about, they put in their application 1863 and got their certificate. I think it was 1867. And so I would have to say she would be the most interesting because there was a lawsuit. When they sold 11 acres, the preacher didn't pay. So there was a lawsuit and
Wow.
everything. And so she was very interesting. And I wanted to know more about her. Who's her parents? Were, coming out of Richmond, capital of the Confederacy. She was mulatto. All I know is her father was from Scotland, and that was it. So who's mama, and why did they ship her to, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania? And so that was our, somewhat the Davis line out of there.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I'm sure folks are taking notes.
Oh, they are out there.
Yeah, they're taking notes.
Now, what about in other interesting stories you found since you started doing your own research?
My own research is just, it's all interesting, and some of the most interesting is the mixtures of the families. Of course, we have some enslaved, and we have a lot of free, and of course, I have I'm going to say my European or white ancestors as well. And so we grew up around a very mixed family. So not knowing what that really meant growing up, until later. And so I just think the interest keeps me going because I want to know about them. And I didn't grow up with, basically only one grandmother. And so I don't have a lot of memories like other people do about grandparents and this, that, and other. Our family was headed by a woman. And so, I passed that down to my daughter per se, the fact that we had a woman that became a widow, with 5 kids in 1942. And she was a domestic house worker,
Yeah.
and raised her kids. But back then, kids got married different ages than what they do now. So, but that was just more to tell that story because there was so many different angles and different connections.
Now, Anne was asking a question. Do you have any quanders in your tree?
Not that I know of, but I'm going to check that out because Bernice Bennett had just sent something about the Quander family out in some connection, and she was asking the same question. So I'm going to check that out. So I don't know, but I know about them because there was a book and things about that family.
Now, when did you first discover WikiTree?
I would say it was about a year. Well, no, about 2014, to be honest with you. But I didn't sign on. And I'm going to tell you why. I have a distant cousin up in Canada who's Bob Simons. And in 2014, he was sending me to links to the trees he was building on the family. And so I just used that as a reference and was giving him information. He was sharing information. So I knew about WikiTree, but until 2020, I think it was April or whatever last year, that I went ahead and said, you know what, I need to do this because I got this whole other side instead of just what Bob had built on the Wardens, which is my mother's maiden name. So that's what got me going. And I thought, I probably can make more connections, get help with research, because he just kept pushing it. That was the links. Go look at this, go look at that.
Yeah.
And so I really didn't know what WikiTree was about until I started really getting into it because it was a reference point. And, I'm sharing it now more than anything just because I've been since April of 2020, and of course, COVID time, had time to go through and see some of the value that's there and where it could go. And so I'm encouraging folks to check it out, and to build their trees. And what I love is the fact that if I come across that person, my ancestor in someone else's tree, the system tells me, is this a match? Is it
Right.
the same person? And so just can't beat that at all.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And nothing more satisfying than being able to connect to other people that are already out there, that have several generations of researched profiles.
And we
Now,
truly are the WikiTree, and I think we are all connected. And some bases are not, we're connected. And I see that, and again, building the trees. And that's a go-to for me in the research, especially like for the UVA research. And I'm going to say it, when I'm looking for that slaveholder, I'm going to WikiTree because I know there's a lot of European data on there. And
Yeah.
I'm looking in Virginia. So that means I'm starting 16, 17, 1800s and coming forward. So that's a go-to, for me in this research.
Now, somebody else had a question here. George and John Marsh were in the 1860 census in the household of Eliza Robinson. Do you have any idea who the Robinsons were?
I do not, and I do not know, but I know Eliza Robinson was a free person because, again, that's 1860, and that is Virginia, aka West Virginia now. But George and John, I do believe, is my George Marsh. And because there's some naming patterns, and I come down to one of John W. Marsh daughters and made a connection. So I believe that is that, my second great grandfather. But the only thing is George in oral history was the slave that my great grandmother talked about was her father. So when did he get free? And because he wouldn't be showing up in the 1860 census unless Eliza was a slaveholder. So there's more to be done about that story. But he's one of my brick wall, big brick wall, because he just appears, there's oral history about him, and I've been trying to use that as leads when, probably a year ago, last time I kind of looked at him a little bit, or someone else, but he's a special one. He's one of those big walls.
Now, who else do you have that you consider one of your most difficult brick walls?
Oh, Lord.
Get out the
The work
list,
I
huh?
do for UVA might be a little easier than my brick walls. William Michael Murphy is huge. And because that's such a common name, and I'm going to say every white Irish family has a William Michael Murphy. And so I believe, well, anyway, my grandfather says that's his father. And I'm going to say the Reverend William Columbus Murphy said his father's name was William Michael Murphy. I know the great grandmother who he supposedly married, because she married a second time, and she married as Nellie Murphy. But William Michael Murphy, I've never been able to connect him with the wife Nellie. I have an assumption, and if I'll share it, which will help somebody researching, but I believe William Michael Murphy might be a coal miner, and I believe he died. And the second husband is a coal miner. And I'm talking about the Buxton area, Buxton, Iowa. People are familiar with that. But they got married in Kentucky. I've done research on the Kentucky, and there were coal mines down there. And so I got that connection. So my assumption is William Michael Murphy is probably a coal miner, but I don't know if he's white. He could be Indian. He's supposedly born in Indian Territory, and don't know when he was born. But the wife, Nellie, was born about 1865 in Greenville, Tennessee. So there's so much. I'm hoping somebody will find William Michael Murphy. I have put this challenge out every time I think about him and how bad I can't find my great grandfather compared to the other people that I can find. But he's a huge one, because we have no idea in where he came from or who he is. And his son, my grandfather, he's got 3 different locations for his birth. So it wasn't reliable to even get the name William Michael, but it's on his Social Security application. And then on the marriage record, when he married my grandmother, one of the wives, the grandmother, he said that he was born in Indian Territory. So that's all I had to go on. And my dad is gone, and all the siblings are gone. So no one's alive, to get that information.
Where at in Kentucky?
Bell County, Kentucky. Bell County. And the second marriage that Nellie McCorkle Murphy had, she had 2 children there also. And again, the husband, Henry Giles, was a coal miner, because they left after they got married. The 2 kids were born. They go to Illinois, another coal mining town, and they're in the 1900 census there. And then they go to Buxton, and they're there in 1905, 1910, 1915. But Nellie's gone by 1915. She passed. And I did connect with the 2 children from this second marriage. Actually, this is several years ago. And when I had time, when I focused on my own tree, I was able to get the daughter, which would be my grandfather's half sister, through her 3rd marriage to her grandchildren. And that's track. And they didn't have much. They just knew that their grandmother had a brother that was a preacher, which was my grandfather, but nothing else. Nothing else.
Yeah, I know. I did some help with the work within the WikiTree mining disasters, part of the disasters project, and we saw that a lot. Where these people lived in mining communities. So if something did happen to the husband, I mean, there was no way for the wife to support herself and take care of her family, and that's who was available to step in, was somebody else within the mining community to take over and make sure her and the children were supported.
Right, because she had 2 children, and they got married. So I figure he must have died within a year or 2 prior to them getting married. William Michael Murphy only had my grandfather that I know of, which is William Columbus Murphy. But my mother said she remembers him talking about his half siblings, which are from the second marriage. So other than that, we don't know.
Of course, about the language again.
Okay, well, actually, the Wardens, Worden, that's a straight line to a gateway ancestor. So that is white all the way there. And they were coming out of France. Well, no, Wardens, England, Lancashire, England coming over. But there's some Dutch also mixed in the family. I think the gibberish might have been Dutch, but the Wardens were not Dutch. They would have been, English per se. But the Boyers, the Boyers are the ones out of France going into Germany and then coming into New York. I just, for some reason, I keep thinking the Dutch the Dutch is the gibberish from the Boyer side, which would be Dutch or French or something. Don't know, but she remembers that always her dad talked about the gibberish, that they probably were cursing, because they were farmers, and stuff like that. No telling what they were, I have no idea. And again, she was 11 when her dad passed, and Mom will join us next week, as I was sharing with you. So she's excited to see if folks find, and she's 91 years old. So, oh yes, we know about the quack quack. Hey there, Kathy, cousin Kathy. We got quacking bushes. Now, again, that's gibberish too. Yeah.
Now, seeing what you have so far about the WikiTree challenge, what is the main thing you hope to get out of this week?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one, hopefully some of the brick walls could be broken down. Number two, I hope for the volunteers, because again, I got to put my teacher hat on. I hope, because of this type of family that I'm made up of, that it enhances their work skills. That gives them a little more different take on it. I do African American genealogy as well as my European. And the thing of it is, they both have their challenges. They both start off the same, but when I'm hopping in and out, depending on what era I'm in, I might be looking at different type of records, and some folks would not be looking at where I would be looking at both. And so I think there's two things, a few brick walls, but you know what the biggest thing is? The sourcing. And I know that's WikiTree's thing. And because it was easy to build that tree, but it wasn't easy to go back when I know I was supposed to go back and put some of the sources in or do an edit. And I'm an APA person as a college professor. I'm going to use APA no matter what. So I know they're going to have a field day, and I'm going to probably beat David Lambert's numbers on the edits. So look out, David, because I'm going to get...
Watch out, David. She's coming after you.
I'm coming at, because he had 3,000 and some edits or something, I think. And I think I'm going to top that, because again, some of mine will be APA, or they're just going to be clipped from Ancestry or Family Search or something, trying to be able to make sure that if something happens to me, this is up and people have access to it and things like that. Do I have enslaved ancestry on both sides of the family? On my mother's side, and on both sides of the family, because how the Henry family comes in is the slaveholder having John B. Henry, and they'll see that on the tree. But William Henry goes all the way back. Aberdeenshire, Scotland is the line there. But and they were Quakers, so I don't quite understand why the son, well, I guess it's the Henry side. They weren't Quakers, but his mama was Quaker in their whole family, the Bordens. And so they were big time Quakers coming in from Kent, England to Massachusetts, New Jersey, and then into Virginia. And so Benjamin Borden Jr. is known for what he did in Augusta County He got 100,000 acres per se, or 92,000 acres from Lord Fairfax. And he basically got the first 100 settlers to settle. So he got, the acres for getting the first 100 people. So I was able to acquire a copy of the map with 100 people on there. But they were Quakers, land greedy Quakers. And I'm saying that because that's my family. But one of the sons that came down, William Henry, he had a relationship with a slave named Rose, and it was his slave. So not quite sure. I understand it clearly, but then you got this long line of Quakers, and then here comes, William having two children, not just one. And so that's on my dad's side. And then I have on my mother's side, I've got the slaveholder, which is a James Roper. And James Roper connects three of the Goins' children married Ropers. And James Roper was a mulatto, a child of a slaveholder, and he inherited all of his father's beholdings. I'm going to say it that way. That means land and property, which included the enslaved. And his dad was Nicholas Roper, come from Suffolk, England, into Jefferson County, Virginia at the time. He was the largest landholder, from what I understand, not just Jefferson County, but also in Virginia at one time. And he gave this mulatto child of his a 99-year lease to all of his holdings and property. And then again, when he died, James became the landholder of the slaves and so forth. Half of his children went wife, the other half went people of color. So again, I get invited to two different family reunions, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is like 10, 15 years ago. And I thought, do they not realize they're all from the same family? And there's two separate reunions. So it's been interesting. So, yeah.
Now, Dante had a question for you here about researching colonial records.
Sometimes it is easier, and it's just because of researching. My favorite is Revolutionary War folks. And so because I'm used to working in that realm and that era, I sometimes do find it a little easier, because I'm not just, there's no census that I'm looking for. There's not going to be birth certificates as we know it. So I'm looking at land patents and land entries, deeds, and those type things. And sometimes I think the colonial research is a little bit easier sometimes. Yes. And I am a member of DAR. I saw that question pop up.
Yes, Cheryl was asking.
Yeah, Jack Jewett in Charlottesville, Virginia. That's the chapter I'm with. Yes. And I'm an associate member of the London chapter. So, yes.
And what advice, with your teacher hat on, would you give to a new family historian?
Well, just like I do a lot of my talks, I say start with what you know. Don't listen to nothing else. Just you start writing down what you know and start logging in the questions that you have. And I always tell people genealogy is about time, place, and asking questions. And because of these different eras that I do, even during slave era or colonial period prior to that, I have questions no matter what I find. And so start with what you know first, and then seek those elders out in your family, and not necessarily just the elders. Anybody that's got family stories, you want to make note of it, because it might not show up now, but it might be 10 years from now, and you come back and you get a lead. And again, it could be someone at your same age, or the auntie or the great grandma or whoever. And I would start off that way. Then I still wouldn't go online. And then I would, start gathering vital statistics, right? I wouldn't hit the census or anything. Just start building your tools of the vital statistics, whatever you can find. Then go to the census and start matching that up, with the dates of being born and when they died and were they there, and, what census were they there. And I'm a big component of timelines. And I know dear Myrtle can hear me right now because I talk about timelines all the time. And I think that's a necessary item, is to start that from the beginning. What you know, get it in chronological order. So I think that's so important. Plus, you're organizing as you go, and it makes it so much easier, because in a simple timeline you can put your questions and what conflicts are there right there in one document and follow through. So I preach on timelines all the time.
Right. And sometimes if you don't look at it that way, you don't find those conflicts. If you don't
Correct.
have that information organized in that way.
And that's why the chronological is so important, because in a timeline, they're going to jump out at you. If something isn't there, what census should be there, what other community or events happen where your ancestors were at. If they're alive during the Civil War time, were there any battles in that community? And a lot of times they say, but Ancestry has the timeline. They don't have local stuff on there unless you put it in there. So you got to look at that local aspect also. And I always question, well, what were my folks doing either during the Civil War, Revolutionary War? What was going on in their community? And I always think about Jefferson County, Virginia, now West Virginia. What is really important was to understand that it changed hands 8 times during the Civil War.
Yeah.
And on that timeline, looking at the question that came up, that's one of the columns. You put your reference, your citation, and things right in there, but you can put a live link. And another thing is, pay attention to who the informant or the witnesses are on a document that you're looking at, and try to find out if there's any connections. So there's so many things you can do, but keep it in one document, organized in chronological order.
Right. Well, that's some really great advice there. What do we have for other questions out there, guys? I know they've been popping up with plenty of them. Patrick was bringing up how important it is to cite your sources. Yes. And, not just for legal documents, but anything you gather about that person, because later on, when you go back to him and it's been a year and you go back, you're not going to know where you got that information if you don't do that.
That's right. And I always prepare myself that if I'm not here, that whoever's going to take this, because I'm working on now, who's going to take this over if something happens to me?
Right.
And I want them to understand that one click can get them back, or at least they can highlight and copy and throw it in Google for the citation, that they should be really directed to where we got the document from. And another thing about that is, we're doing this not really for us. Right. It's for who's coming after us. And I don't have grandchildren. I don't know if my daughter's up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't even know what time it is, where she's at. But the biggest thing, I don't have grandchildren. I have a son and a daughter. They're both adults, and I don't have grandchildren. So I'm going to look to those cousins or those nieces or those nephews. Right. They love to hear the stories, but they're not doing the work. So I've got to tag them in. Maybe I need to start paying them or something and say, okay, I'm going to give you X amount of dollars an hour and you help me do this, type thing. And that might be the way I get them. Because I took over basically from my mother. She was kind of like the family historian for the family. And I've taken on that role the last 30 years, basically. And of course, we got so much more access than, it's unbelievable what access we have. And it's also overwhelming that we have. So, I have to take on Saturdays. Okay, what am I listening? You guys wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, or 8:30 in the morning with the WikiTree morning. It's Mags and somebody else, and it starts, and then 3 different chapter genealogy groups. They all have sessions 10:30 and 11, and I'm thinking, okay, which one can I go to, or go for a few minutes to each one? But you guys start singing off about 8:30 in the morning on Saturday, and I think it's Mags and Sarah, yeah.
Sarah.
I thought, oh my goodness. So I just lay in the bed and and put it on and listen to them. So what's that, Dante? I know your emphasis on using timelines. Can you expand more on understanding the migrate patterns and their significance? Because you're clocking where people are at by date or say time, you should see the migration patterns. I just posted on a Fort Wayne genealogy group that my grandparents, William and Viola Murphy, the time frame they were in Fort Wayne, I believe I posted 6 different addresses from the city directories. And I thought, okay, now you know what? I'm going to map that out because they're still in the neighborhood. And so I figure, why were they moving so much? And number one, they probably were poor, and because where they lived at, I know at one time he was a janitor at something. He was associate pastor. I'm talking about William Columbus Murphy. And he was also delivering coal on the side. So I thought, if you're a pastor, you're poor. And I'm saying during this time, he was associate pastor. So in his job, and again, they had 6 or 7 kids, all in Fort Wayne. And there was a Mr. Warfield in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and in the Black community there, and Kurt and them at the Allen County Public Library, they opened up the journals of this guy who journaled for about 20 some years. And they showed the entry when my great grandfather died, and where the guy was writing that him and the wife was taking a dish of food over to the house because Govan Curitan had died, and this, that, and other. And another time in his entry, he said my grandfather delivered the coal, and he felt so sorry for him that he gave him an additional 25 cents for delivering the coal. And it was like, oh my God, how poor was he? Because apparently that quarter was big, at that time. And so that was very interesting that you had a community member for 20 some years or 30 years, and they got all of the journals in their handwritten notes daily, everything that was happening in the community there. And so it was fabulous. They now have them all scanned up on their website, on the Genealogy Center's website. So that was fabulous. So I hope that answered your question, Dante, because you will be able to see as they move around, and also from location to location, because you want to go in between the 10 years of the census, and also find out if there was a state census, and if any other transactions or events happen in their lives. Was there a baby born? That's another clue. If they were born and still in that county, you know where they were at. And the next question is, did you have a slave schedule census for the man who had children with Rose? Actually, the white family is the ones that told me, and their information, and there was a lawsuit. So that's how we verified, or I was able to say, okay, that's his child. It's William Henry, born about 1763, and he's born in Frederick County, Virginia. And these Henrys come, like I said, Kent, England, and come on over. No, I'm sorry, Aberdeenshire, and come on over. But the Henry family comes into Virginia, and they have these 2 kids. Now, what happened was he freed him at some point, and I haven't been able to figure that out. And then I found out William Henry, just about within the last 6-7 months, that he actually was a patriot in the Revolutionary War. And how I figured that was my William Henry is because they said he went to Tennessee after the war, to Greenville, Tennessee, which is where Nellie, the great grandmother, was at. And that's where he died at. So he's a landowner and tract. But there was a court case because of the two kids that he had. One of the wives, number one, divorced him because he was messing with Rose. And then the court case is William Henry gave, AKA his daughter, Delphia, to the son-in-law. But he was supposed to free her. So there was a court case, and I got the archive lady to pull that file for me, this, that, and other, from Tennessee. And she got her freedom, but the son-in-law was going to charge Rose $300 to buy her daughter's freedom. So again, this was all in court.
Wow.
So that let us know all the connections. And then I dealt with the Henry family and looking at their research and what they had done, and then the divorce. And so, yeah, he's got two kids, and John B. Henry is there in Greenville, Tennessee, and free man in 1830, 40, 50, 60, coming on forth. So, yeah, he was born about 1811. And the Historical Society was another part of working on that. And so I had encountered with them about 10 years ago, and they were pulling the stuff, and they said, you know, those Henrys originate out of Virginia. And that's how it took me about, 5 years to get to Virginia, per se. And then they're less than 2 hours away from me right now. So,
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Do we have any other questions this evening? Fascinating. And Anne Googleick wants to know if they could read the court case if you had a copy available.
Of course. Where do I send it? So you told me not, I don't get to touch my tree or go back in there.
No, you don't. But if you do have a copy scanned up, you can send it to the captain. You have her email. So
okay.
Donna will make sure the people Donna will make sure that they can get a look at it.
Okay. And actually, if you go to Alelia Bundles, if anybody is familiar with her, in her website, she is Madam C.J. Walker's great-great-granddaughter. She comes from Delphia's line. I come from the brother John Henry, and it's actually on one of her blog posts. So I'll still send it to Donna, but it's there as well.
Chris Ferriello here is asking if you've ever worked with Carolyn and reparational genealogy.
We follow each other on Twitter and have great conversations, but I have not worked with her on that at all. And also, she was on Genealogy Adventures, so I had a chance to see her, not just from Twitter, and interact with her. She was on Genealogy Adventures. That comes on Saturdays at 4:00. I like to say that. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Now, we have plenty of people watching, so make sure you like the video. If you haven't already subscribed, do that for notifications. I know people are just anxious to get started in Shelley's
they've already started.
Yeah, they have.
So I can't do anything, right? Am I able to answer questions or anything? Only if it comes from Donna.
Yeah, they have to go through Donna, or else you can't answer them. And you may get some emails that say like, oh, these profiles need to be merged. Just ignore them, because we'll take care of all that for you this week.
Okay.
We'll take care of all of it.
Okay, so all right.
We're gonna find you.
I saw some emails already, so I thought, don't touch it, don't touch it.
I know the hardest part. Melanie's down there too. Melanie was recently a guest, and she had to stay out of her tree and out of Discord for a week. It was like painful for her, I think.
Well, I have plenty to do, because I don't get to focus on my own stuff as much as other people's trees. So, and again, I wish everybody the best of luck. So hopefully we all benefit from this, and I'm sure we will. I mean, just thank those volunteers. My goodness, I've been watching for the last year what you guys have been doing, and it is amazing. It is amazing. And, I even took on a profile, on the U.S. Black, the notables that they
Yeah.
started. And I took on one. And again, for personal reasons, because I'm trying to connect those Davises. And they're in the same county looking for that plantation. So hopefully that will come out also, because people have not talked about that, about Benjamin O. Davis and his line back to slavery. And they only know him for him being notable as the first Black general, Army, and then his son. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, it has been a pleasure having you here. And we will see everybody back next Wednesday so we can tell Shelley what all we
And I'm
found.
going to beat David on those edits.
Yeah. She's going to beat that number, Dave. So see you
That's a
guys
good
later.
thing. Thanks